right, so in this section 2.4, we're going to be graphing linear equations in what's called standard form. In the previous videos, we've been graphing linear equations in what's called slope-intercept form, y equals mx plus b. Again, you better know that. Now, standard form is a little bit different. It is what we call ax plus by equals c. And without going into a lot of detail here, I need you to understand that I can take this and solve for y, and it ends up getting me y equals mx plus b. These two equations are actually the same thing, just because the math geniuses and gods have demanded it so. That's what these two equations are. These are both types of linear equations, and they are the exact equation but rewritten in different forms. Slope-intercept, standard form. Now, the thing about standard form is A and B are not both 0 at the same time. Just a little caveat in there, no big deal right now, but let's just move on. So, if we get a standard equation such as ax plus by equals c, there's two ways that we can graph it. First off is change it to y equals mx plus b. This is what most people typically do. It's what they've been taught, it's what they know. Even when I'm teaching college classes, they always change it to y equals mx plus b. However, there actually is an easier way, and it's by finding the x and y intercepts. And this is what I call Mr. Lewis's pinky rule, and we'll get to the pinky rule either way. Now, here's the thing, you need to know both of these methods. You need to be able to change the standard form into slope-intercept form. You need to be able to do that. And you also need to be able to find the x and y intercept just by looking at this equation. You need to know both things. Cannot stress that enough. You'll be seeing later on tests and quizzes where I will give you a problem and I'm going to say, okay, solve by changing it to slope-intercept form. Whereas in another question, I might say solve by finding the x and y intercepts. So keep that in mind. You've got to know both ways, even though one way I think is a little bit easier than the other, doesn't really matter. All right, so let's just look at it. Here I have two different things. I've got one, I want you to change this equation to y equals mx plus b, and then this one we're going to use the pinky rule. And notice that they are exactly the same thing. All right, so let's just do this one. It says change to y equals mx plus b. What that is really saying is solve for y. And just like we said in a previous video where we are solving and rewriting equations, that's what we're doing here. So my job is to get y by itself. In order for me to get y by itself, the first thing I have to do is SADMEP this thing. So when I look at this side, there's nothing else I can simplify this side to, so I need to SADMEP. Well, in SADMEPing, I'm going to get rid of this x. And since it's positive, I'm going to subtract x on both sides. And I now have 3y equals negative 3 minus x. Now that we've done that, we're still trying to get y by itself, so doing SADMEP, we've done subtraction in the addition part, now it's the multiplication division side of things. We know that since these two are multiplying, we need to divide in order to get rid of it. Now, this right here, we have done in earlier things, and I mentioned this in an earlier video, when we are rearranging equations, this is correct. However, it's not the, for lack of a better word, let's give a Mr. Lewis word, it's not the correctest. All right, so what do we do here? Well, we're trying to get it into this form, so what we're actually going to use is the distributive property. This 3 right here is dividing both the negative 3 and the negative x. So that's what we're going to do. Negative 3 divided by 3 gives me negative 1. Well, technically right here, this isn't just a negative x, it's a negative 1x. And negative 1 divided by 3 is negative 1/3, and that is going to be 1/3 x. Now, this looks a little bit familiar to you. You should be able to see that, hey, this looks very much like slope-intercept form, and you're exactly right. What I need to know is I can rearrange this. This right here, since it's connected to my x, this whole piece is actually my mx. So I can rewrite this as negative 1/3 x because these two pieces are together. And then this last piece can be written as my y-intercept. So this whole equation, when rearranged, is y equals negative 1/3 x minus 1. Now that I've done that, it's just a matter of graphing using the slope-intercept rules that you learned with John Henchy. Negative 1 happens to be my y-intercept, and then negative 1/3 is my slope. Bing, bang, bada, boom, you're done. You've got it graphed, okay? I'm going to do an example here probably soon. So now, for us to do the Mr. Lewis pinky rule, our job is to actually find the x-intercept and the y-intercept. And if we draw a little graph just to kind of show what this is talking about, here's my x-axis, here's my y-axis, and I have a line. Well, right here is my y-intercept. And my y-intercept is when x is 0 and y is some number. It doesn't really matter what number it is, it's just a number. And my x-intercept is when we don't know what x is. It can be any number, but my y will always be 0. This is just a general rule. Knowing this, we can kind of do a couple of things. If I want to know what the y-intercept is, I can take this number 0 and plug in the place of x. When I do, it gets rid of the x. So now that we know this, we can use this rule to kind of help us along with you finding the x-intercept and the y-intercepts. So how do we do that? Well, let's start with the x-intercept first. So the x-intercept, we know that y is 0. So if I take 0 and I plug in the place of y, I can find my x-intercept. So this is how it would go. I have the original equation, and I'm going to plug 0 in the place of y. So I get x plus 3 times 0 equals negative 3. Well, what's 3 times 0? It's 0. So that leaves me with x is negative 3. So what did I just discover? I just discovered that this point right here is going to be negative 3 and 0. All right, this is my x-intercept. Now I can do the same thing with my y-intercept, but this time, instead of putting 0 in the place of y, I'm putting 0 in the place of x. And when I do, I get 0 plus 3y equals negative 3, and I get 3y equals negative 3. And then when I divide by 3 on both sides, I get y is equal to negative 1. So what did I discover? I discovered that my y-intercept is 0, negative 1. Now these two don't match up with my drawing, but what we can do is actually graph it, and I'll show you. So negative 3, 0 would be somewhere around here, and 0, negative 1 would be somewhere around here. My x-intercept, my y-intercept, and now it's just a matter of drawing my line, and I am done. Now, Mr. Lewis, this seems like a lot of awful work, and you know what? You're exactly right. So this is Mr. Lewis's pinky rule. Check this out. I want to know, I'm going to kind of hide this just a minute. I want to know my x-intercept. Well, I know that my x-intercept means that it's going to cross the x-axis and that I am going to have a y of 0. Well, when y is 0, guess what I can do? I can use my pinky and I'm going to cover up y. And guess what? I have x is equal to negative 3. Oh, cool. So I just found my x-intercept. Awesome sauce. Now, I want to know my y-intercept. I know that if my y-intercept, my x has to be 0 because that's part of what the y-intercept is, so I can cover up x. And now I know what my y-intercept is by saying 3y equals -3, solve for it, and I get -1. Look at what I just did. It's the exact same answer as working it out the hard way. If I need to know the x-intercept, all I have to do is cover the y. If I need to know the y-intercept, all I have to do is cover the x. That's Mr. Lewis's pinky rule. So let's go ahead and get to some problems here. Let's look at number 1. I'm going to work this one out with you because I'm mean, and I'm going to leave the other ones to you because they're tougher. First off, it says write the linear equation in slope-intercept form. So what do? I need to get this y by itself. And notice that it's just not a y, it's actually a -1y. This is very important. That was a bad one, Mr. Lewis. Yes, it was. All right, so I have a -1y. So my job is, first off, is to get rid of this 2x. And since it's positive, I can subtract 2x on both sides. And I get -1y is equal to 7 minus 2x. Now, since this is a -1y, I can divide by -1 on both sides, okay? With that being said, this -1, that cancels out, and I use distributive property. 7 divided by -1 is a -7. -2 divided by -1 is a positive 2x. And we can rewrite this one last time, and I'm kind of running out of room. I'm going to write it above. Y equals 7, not 7, but 2x minus 7. This would be my slope-intercept form. Now, the same concept is going to happen with 2 and 3. I want you to try 2 and 3 on your own. All right, so for number 2, you should have gotten that y is equal to -1/4 x minus 2/7. And for number 3, you should have gotten that y is equal to 3/5 x plus 4. So this is very simple. Once you've done slope-intercept form, we could simply graph it. Now let's look at number 4. It says graph the linear equation using intercepts, using a graphing calculator to check your answer. All right, so there's 2 things that we're going to have to do. First off, we need to graph this using intercepts. Now, a while ago, I kind of gave you a pinky rule, so I'm going to work this one with you. So I want to know my intercepts, and Mr. Lewis's pinky rule, if I want to know the x-intercept, I actually have to cover up the y. So, to find my x-intercept, cover my y. Now, what do I have? I have 2x equals 12. Well, I can write that down. And I get, when I work this all the way out, divide by 2 on both sides, I get that x is equal to 6. Well, what does that mean? It means that my x-intercept is at 6 and 0. All right, now I need to know my y-intercept. Well, my y-intercept, in order to find that, I have to cover my x up. And that leaves me with -3y equals 12. So I can write that down. And what do? I can divide by -3 on both sides. When I do, I get y is equal to -4. Well, what does that mean? It means that my y-intercept is at 0, -4. Now that I have this, it's just a matter of plotting the points. Well, I don't have anything, but let's see. Since I have a 6 and a 4 here, let's count by 2s. So this would be 2, 4, 6. So my x-intercept would be right here. And now I need to count for my y-intercept, which would be at -4. Oh, I'm trying to get something, get a better ruler. It's stuck to the desk. Technical difficulties. All right, so at -4 would be -2, -4, which would be here. And now it's just a matter of drawing my line. So we want to draw it as detailed as we possibly can. There we go. And I've got my line. Now, that's it. I've used my pinky rule, found my 2 points, and I've graphed it. But now it's telling me that I have to use a graphing calculator to check your graph. Well, I hate to tell you this, but the only way that you're going to be able to do that is we have to rewrite this in slope-intercept form. So I'm going to write it over to the side. I have 2x minus 3y equals 12. I am solving from y, so I need to minus 2x on both sides. And after I do, I get negative 3y is equal to 12 minus 2x. Now I need to divide by negative 3 on both sides. And I get that y is equal to negative 4 plus 2/3 x. And if I want to rewrite this, I get that y is equal to 2/3 x minus 4. This is my slope-intercept. Well, does that make sense? Well, let's just check it out. If this is correct, it should match this line. Well, according to this, my y-intercept is negative 4. Hey, negative 2, negative 4. That checks out. And then it says my slope is 2/3. So I can go up by 2 because I'm counting by 2s, and then I'm going to the right by 3. And notice that it comes right here because this is 1, 2, 3. So that checks out. So my slope is right, but that's not what the problem has to do. It told us to use the graphing calculator. So turn it on, go to y equals, clear out what I did last time, and I'm going to I'm going to put my fraction as in parentheses 2/3, close it off, x, and then I'm going to subtract 4, and then I'm going to hit the graph button. And let's look at what it's doing. Very good. So we can actually double check ourselves and hit trace, and we see that our y-intercept is at 0 and 4. And if we're right, if we hit 6, it should give us 6 and 0 because that's what we said this point was. So we've double checked it. So why don't you try 5 on your own? All right, so after this, what you should have gotten for your X-intercept would have been negative 27 and 0. Notice what I did for this because this was such a small one. I actually counted by 9, so this would be negative 9, negative 18, and negative 27. And then for my Y-intercept, I had 0 and negative 3, so those were my two intercepts. Now, my job was to use to graph this as a calculator, but in order to do so, I have to rewrite this in slope-intercept form, and you should have gotten negative 1/9 x minus 3. And again, that minus 3 happens to match up with our y-intercept. Now, this might have happened to you. When you went graphed, you probably got something that looked like this. And then when you traced it, you saw that you were correct on your y-intercept, but you needed to know if you were correct on your x-intercept. So when you tried to go equals negative 27, you were hoping to get that y is equal to 0, but you got invalid or go to. It might have happened to you. This is because this whole graph is only so big. It only goes but so far. So we have to change something called our zoom. So I want to introduce this to you now. If you go to zoom, you can zoom in, zoom out. So for now, let's zoom out by hitting 3. And we come back to this, but hit enter. And when it does is it's going to regraph it from a different position. So you have zoomed out of the graph. So now we can check our stuff. We can hit trace and we can find out that 0, when x is 0, y is negative 3, which is still good. But let's find out what happens when x is negative 27. We hit enter. It tells me that our y is 0, so we are good. This means that our graph is correct based upon what our calculator is telling us. All right, so let's move on to number 6, and I'm going to work this out a little bit with you just to kind of help you out. Yeah, we'll do this one together. Why not? It says you go shopping and buy X shirts for $12 and Y jeans for $28. The total spent was $84. Write an equation in standard form that models how much money you spent. Well, this sounds horrible at first, but think about it. You know you got an X amount of shirts. You also know you got a Y amount of jeans. How much do those shirts cost? Well, they cost $12. $12 per shirt. And how much do the jeans cost? $28. And together, since you bought both of them, it's going to cost you a total of $84. So your equation is 12x plus 28y equals 84. Pretty easy. Now it says graph the equation and interpret the intercepts. Well, let's go after our X-intercept first, okay? Well, that's easy. In order to find our X, let's hide our Y. And I don't feel like doing math. Actually, I can do that in my head, but oh well. So we can say 84 divide by 12 because of the pinky rule. Whoopsie, wrong thing. Let's try that again. 84 divide by 12 gives me 7. So my X-intercept is going to be at 70. What is my Y-intercept going to be at? Well, let's use our pinky rule again. So I'm going to say 84 divide by 28, and I get 3. So my Y-intercept is at 0, 3. So we can plot that. So let's see what we have here. What can I count by? 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. Yeah, let's count by 2s. So my intercept is at 7. So 2, 4, 6, 7 right here. And my Y-intercept is at 3. So 2, this would be 3 right here. So where is my thingy? There's my thingy. I found it. We're going to draw our line, okay? Right there. Now, we found our intercepts. Our intercepts are at 0, 3 for our Y and 7, 0 for our X. Now, I've done the easy part. This is where I'm going to give you some critical thinking skill question. Notice what it says. It says interpret the intercepts. I didn't just tell you to tell me the intercepts. I've just told you the numbers. I've told you. Your job now is to tell me what the numbers mean. This is an imperative skill that I want you to try on your own. So make sure you're doing this. Try it and then find me to make sure you're doing it correctly. I'm not going to give you the answer in this video. Find me, and I want you to tell me what these intercepts mean. And that's it for this video, and I will see you in the next one. Bye-bye.